You're watching The Ready Writer, a show where I get to speak to writers of all different genres, mediums, and experiences. The Ready Writer. Are you ready?
Hi, and welcome to another episode of The Ready Writer. I'm your host, Casey Bell, and today we have Gaby Anderson. Let's get this show started. When did you first discover your interest in writing?
A lot of people ask me that, and I don't really know. I think it was sort of an accumulation of different things. The first time that I can really remember is back in, I would say, like the mid-90s, when emails first began to be a thing. And I started writing emails to everybody because it was easy. And I would get these responses back from the emails, and either people would say, Gaby, you're really, really weird. Like, don't ever email me again because you're freaking me out. Or the other emails were, you're really, really weird. Why don't you write a book? And I think that was somewhere along the way where I sort of said, oh, okay, maybe I should write something. And I started writing, and I wanted to write about my family. I've got this, I think, pretty weird Hungarian family. And so I started writing, and I just, had some ideas, and it just kind of went from there.
So the next question you already answered. When did you first realize you wanted to be an author?
Probably, yeah.
So the next question, what did you do? Because, if you go to college, they'll teach you the proper way to write a book. They don't really go into publishing. So how did you know where to start and when to start, and what did you do to start?
I didn't really know anything. I studied business in college. So I did do some writing and some creative writing just because it was just part of the curriculum. And my mom says I used to write when I was a kid, and she said that I wrote a lot of weird stuff when I was a kid, but I don't remember very much of it. But when I decided I was going to write, I remember I bought a desk, and I sort of set myself up, and I said I was going to write now, and I just started writing, and it was really, really bad. I'm pretty sure what I was writing was horrendous. And then at one point, my dad looked at some of it, because, when you start writing, I'm sure you can relate to this, you start writing and it's hard to show anybody what you're writing. It's, you're putting your heart out there and saying, judge me, And I remember showing it to my dad once, and he was this very opinionated, real strong Hungarian accent. And he looked at it and he said, you're no Shakespeare, but it's just as good as everything else out there. So just keep going. And I was like, okay. And that was like my first big push to say, okay, all right, maybe I can do this. So that's sort of, I didn't have any training other than the Atlanta Writers Group once we moved to Atlanta. And that's where I learned. That's where I really learned.
Is that where you learned also how to become a published author?
Yes. So when we moved here, my husband said, I had the whole book written, and he said, you need to join something. You need to do something. So I found the Atlanta Writers Group, and I joined them. And I remember the first time that I ever went, we were meeting in somebody's house, and I had never done anything like that before. You had to bring 5 pages, and I was extremely nervous. And I don't like to speak in public anyway. It makes me very nervous. Not anymore so much. But I remember showing up with my 5 pages, and I said, all right, I got like a full daytime job. I've got a career. I've got other stuff. And I said, if this is terrible, please let me know, because I can spend my time doing something else. And please be honest with me. And I read my 5 pages, and they were like, nope, you got to keep going. You got to keep writing. So you learn, and if you're a part of a critique group, and I would recommend everybody be part of a critique group, and it's important to find the right one, but you have to really be able to take the critique, and if it's a good critique group, it's given. I can't think of the word. It's given in a good way, it's constructive criticism, and so they did. It took me, just because I was so busy with everything else, it took me. I had about 10 years to rewrite the whole thing, just because I was busy, and I would be gone sometimes for 2 years just because work was busy. But it took me about 10 years to rewrite the whole thing, and it was because of them. They're the ones who taught me how to do it. And then one of our friends got published with Black Rose Writing, and she was telling us to go there, and we just all followed. And I keep saying that Black Rose is collecting us, a bunch of us, and that's how you learn, because we didn't know any of the stuff, before we all kind of started getting published. And then, man, you learn the hard way, what publishing means.
Yeah, well, one of the things I learned that I wish I would have had a group to join, because the first book I published, I thought it was the best book in the world. And maybe 4 years later, I reread it and thought to myself, this really isn't all that good.
Right,
and
right.
I realize now I probably should have had,
Right.
someone look over it and things of that nature. So with
Yeah.
that said, what other lessons from the time you started writing to the time you published the book did you learn that you didn't know prior to?
Oh, so many different things. I remember the first time we have, I don't know if you've heard that, we have here twice a year the Atlanta Writers Conference, and it's done through the Atlanta Writers Club. If you've never heard of it or never been to it, it's really, really good. I think it's getting to be one of the big ones in the country. And I remember going to my first one way before I had really done a lot of work on the book. And you had to send in like 20 pages before you even get to the conference at the time to do it, like a manuscript review with a real agent. And I remember somewhere in the back of my head thinking, I bet they're going to like call me before even the conference starts and like sign me, because it's so good. And I was just, like you, I thought it was so good and so special, and I was so wrong. So, so the things that I have learned is let other people look at it. You got to get other eyes on it. Even, I go usually every week or every other week, and just even reading out loud what you've written makes a huge difference, because it sounds completely different. So, you say a sentence and you kind of trip over it when you read it. That should be your signal that something might not be right. Because if you're tripping over it, then your reader is probably tripping over it as well. We learned a lot about, I'm going to like micro the things that I've learned here, So things about echoes, I'm like the big echo bitch at this point, that, echoes are everywhere in your book, and it takes thousands of words out of your book if you start looking for echoes. Like I did, the first word that I ever did was that. And I just did a word search in my manuscript for that. And I took out 8,000 words. 8,000 words. And I thought, well, how good can it be, if I've taken out 8,000 words? I don't know. You learn about, I submitted the book, like before I had submitted to Black Rose, I was doing, the query thing where you hit all the agents in New York everywhere, and you have your Excel sheet. And I had an agent in New York write back to me one time. She wrote back to me in about 12 hours. And she said, I love your query. Please send me the whole thing. And I spent about 4 days, did not sleep, going over the entire thing looking for mistakes, because I went into panic mode, and that was very stupid. But because my personality changed after about the third night of not sleeping. So who knows what I was writing at that point. But finally I sent it in, and she read it. And she gave me some of the best advice I'd ever had. And again, it's having somebody else look at it goes back to having somebody else, read your work and, have a different point of view. But she read it and she really liked it. But she said, and this was like one version ago or 2 versions ago even, she said, I love it. I love your character. I love the ride. You lose the tension of your book in the middle. It completely goes away, because I set something up and then Katie goes somewhere. And she's like, what happened to the whole thing that you set up at the beginning? And it was, she just like that, she gave me just like the most brilliant advice, and it made me, fix the book just like that. So you really have to let other people look at it. I think that's the big thing. And that goes, again, back to the critique groups. And then, oh man, reviews. I don't know how you are with this. The reviews are the bane of my existence. I've had people email me and call me and text me and say, I love it, it's wonderful, and they don't leave a review. And I'm like, oh my God, can you just leave me a review? I can see your look. Please, what is it? Like, please just leave me a review. It's just, and to be fair, before I was published, even like 3 or 4 years ago, it wouldn't even occur to me to leave a review. It just isn't in your brain. You don't even think that it's a big deal. So it's just, but that, I think for all of us now, like there's a big group of us that have gotten published, and the reviews are for a lot of us, the bane of our existence, just to say, well, what do I have to do to make you leave me a review, So I just did it on my website where I said, if you leave me a review, and you like send me a screenshot of the review, I'll send you the first chapter of the sequel. And so we'll see like that. But, it's just been a journey, and I'm still learning, because I'm still new. This just came out in January. So it's been a very humbling experience. It's been a very, very humbling experience for sure.
On the review part, I definitely, when I first, I forget where I was when I first found out having reviews on your site, whether it's through Amazon, Barnes & Noble, or Books A Million, is a good thing. So when I started asking for reviews, it reminded me of all the times I bought something and they asked for a review, or I got an email and I wouldn't do it. And now every time I get those emails, I'm like, let me leave a review.
Right,
what it
right.
is, a restaurant, whatever.
Right.
So yeah,
We don't
I
even
totally
think about it.
understand that. Yeah.
And most people don't. So you can only get so mad, but we're just sitting here always begging for the reviews, because that's how Amazon pushes your book more. If the more reviews you have. And for me, it's like, okay, you're texting me that you love it, and you're calling me saying, let's talk about it, but leave a review. It's like, why is it so hard? But that's been, for a lot of us, that's been really rough.
One other thing for those who may be watching, who's an author or a writer and don't know what an echo is, what is an echo?
Echo is just a repeated word in your book. So, and of course, there's only so many words, but you have to. I use something called Pro Writing Aid. I don't know if you've ever heard of it. It's really, really good, and it'll run a report. I just go chapter by chapter usually, and it'll run a report, say overused words. Or I actually make it show me every time I use a word, and it's pretty incredible how often you can do that and you don't know that you're doing it, and it can make a very, very significant difference in how well it works. But yeah, just overused, that those are mine. That, back, just. So yeah. I think everybody has certain words that they sort of fall on that use like buffer words or something, and for me those are a couple of them.
Just was one I was thinking of, because I remember there was some on Twitter, I think it was like an image of what's the word, when writing, some tips for writing, and one of them was the word just, don't use it. And I was like, what? You're not supposed to use it.
You don't need it.
And so now every time, even when I'm speaking and I'm about to say just, I find another way, and I find out that you don't need it. I'm thinking, well, then why did they create it?
Right, who started that stupid word?
But that is something that gets me every time I'm about to say it. I'm like, nope, don't say it.
Yeah, it's like, I remember I took a speech class in college, and I can tell you like the two things that I learned in college, which does not say very much for what I learned in college. But one of them, in the speech class, my professor said, don't use the word because just means that you don't know what to say next. It's very hard not to do that. And I have a ton of dialogue in my book, and my characters do say sometimes, because I want my dialogue to sound realistic. So it's just, and you'll hear it, once you start seeing it and noticing it and checking for it, you'll see what a big difference it makes. Also, it will ruin you for every other book and every other thing that you read everywhere, anywhere, anytime, because you're going to be looking for echoes.
I like that. So with everything you've learned so far, what the number one thing that was the most challenging to do and learn in the process of publishing your book?
That's interesting. I think so far, to manage my expectations, I would say. It's doing pretty good. I'm pretty happy with it. I'm not, it didn't blow up. Nobody from Hollywood's calling me, so you have to really, manage, what is still your expectations, and even the expectations that are sort of hiding in your mind that you don't even want to really think about, but they're still sort of there. For me, it's kind of that, just managing. I look at my ratings on Amazon a lot, and it's very weird how they jump up and down. It's very interesting. And then I saw about 2 weeks ago, I was looking at Amazon one night and it said Audible on next to it, said like Kindle, paperback, and then all of a sudden it said Audible. And I thought, that's interesting because I don't have an audiobook. And then I just sort of ignored it. And then I went back and it said play sample. And I thought, what? And I played the sample and my book had been turned into an audiobook by the publisher without me knowing it. And I freaked out because I started listening to it, and that made me cry. Hearing my words coming out of somebody else's mouth made me cry because I was so blown away that they had actually done that. And they had done a pretty good job. No, actually, she did a really good job. She did a great job. There's some Hungarian in there. There's some French. There's some Hebrew in there, and she killed it all. So I actually found her on Facebook and thanked her because she did a great job. But yeah, I would say the biggest thing is managing your expectations and, being okay with not, rocketing to, the Oprah Book Club right away. It's, we'll see.
Yeah, that was definitely my first, Oprah's going to call me. And like I said, 4 years later after reading the book, I'm like, no, she's not.
Aw. So are you going to try to rework it?
Probably not. Only because it was my experience. Well, a mixture of my and other people's experience in high school, and I'm kind of I'm over it.
Got it.
I was at a different place at the time.
Got it. So a little therapy too.
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah. Well, we all do that, don't we?
So talk about your latest book. The title, what's it about, and what?
So the book is the sequel to South of Happily, and the working title so far is Dream a Little Dream. And I don't want to give it away too much, but it's basically the continuation of what happens to Katie Kiss after the things in the first book happen to her. So I'm going to go a little bit more, and I wasn't really going to do it, but then when I just wasn't done with her. And I've heard a lot of people say that, I just wasn't done with them. Even before I was finished with this book, I would go away when I would be working and busy, and I would miss them. I would miss them all. And other people seem to have that reaction too, because everybody sort of finds a character that they connect with, and they're like either like Team Katie or Team Jesse or whoever. And somebody from the Atlanta Writers Club, George, was saying, I think Jessie needs her own book because she's such a strong personality. So I may do that. But so I'm working on that one. I'm about 3/5 of the way done of that one. I'm writing a lot quicker. And then I've got a lot of other books that are, like 20 or 30 pages in, you start it, and I have some ideas because I also want to sort of try to write a different genre. I'd like to write some horror. I don't know why, but I would. I'd really like to write like a good thriller, that really gets you, but I don't know how they do it. So I've got ideas. We'll see where they go.
So then the first book, what's the synopsis of the first one?
Oh, that's really hard. So
without giving too much away, of course.
Right. I have such a hard time describing what it is because I'm just going to do it the way that I say it in my head. So there's a lot of different layers in this book. So the very bottom layer is that it's Katie Kiss, who's this young woman who's a first generation Hungarian American, and she's in a very bad relationship and she's getting a divorce. And the process of her getting that divorce is sort of the vehicle that takes you from the beginning of the book until the end of the book. Then there's this other layer where she is the daughter of these very strong-willed Hungarian immigrants, and the family owns a restaurant, and she's been sort of very obedient to them and has sort of fallen in line with, they're very controlling. They're controlling because they love her, but they're very protective of her, and she never really understands why. And she does end up going to therapy in the book, and it's really good therapy. And that part was very important to me because my husband is a therapist. My oldest daughter is a therapist now, and I work in behavioral health. It's what I do for a living. And so I got really tired of bad, like in a book, like the bad stepdad and the bad therapist. And so I wanted to really portray a good therapist. And she's very, very weird, but she's also very good. So Katie starts getting therapy, and she starts going along, and she starts finding things out about her family that she had no idea of. And that really affects sort of her arc and the way that she moves forward. And then the other layer of the book, and this is sort of the fun layer, is that Katie is super, super weird. She's like, I like to say that, her head is sort of popped open and there's this like very weird goopy mess going on inside, and it's written in first person, and you're going to hear every single thing that she's thinking. And she gets deep down, she gets really, down into what she's thinking. And I've had a lot of people react saying, that's exactly the way that I reacted when this happened. And, like, wow, she's like thinking what I'm thinking. And I'm just spilling all of it, out of her head. So it just moves along like that with all of these little layers piled on, as she grows as a person. And, I like to say the book is 6 weeks long. And so when you go to therapy in general, unless you're doing like EMDR or something, you're not getting fixed in 6 weeks. Your problems are not going away in 6 weeks. And so she does make a lot of progress, but she's not done. So that's why I needed the second book. I don't know if that was a good explanation or not.
Very, very well.
Oh, thank you.
I believe you said this was based on family, or your... There are a lot of things that actually happened in the book that happened to me. And then, you have to start, twisting and turning. So not everything is real, but there are several things that are real. And Katie, I would say, is probably a combination of my daughters and me, because she's 26 and I am not 26. So a lot of her language and a lot of her behavior, I'm with my kids a lot, and my kids are amazing. And so a lot of their language and a lot of their behavior, I was able to put into Katie. So there is a lot. In fact, I had a friend of the family read it, like just read the manuscript before it came out. And I was very scared of him because he's like a big IT guy, and he called me in like all capital letters. He said, "I finished your book. Call me immediately." And I thought, oh no, what's going to happen? And he called me, and he had so many questions, and he was like, "Where did you learn how to write?" That was his first question. And then he had like, I don't know if he had like marked up the book or something. And he's like, "Is there something that you want to tell me about your family that you don't know?" And I'm like, "Dude, you've known me since the day I was born. You know everything." So I think I fooled some people, but it is based on a lot of things that are true. Yeah, for sure. Which made it easy to write that way. Well, that was actually the next question I was just about to ask. Has any of your family read it, and what was their response to it?
Yes. So my mother read it, and my mother lives with us, and she was the one that I was most afraid of. Because the mother in the book is not her, but it is a piece of her. Just, the mother in the book is very funny. She's very opinionated. She's, sort of like that very like blunt Eastern European thing going on, where she's just saying what she wants to say, and it's not always the thing that you want to hear. So they have a very, love-hate relationship. So she was the hardest one. But she loves it now. I think she's read it 5 times. She's listened to the audiobook, I think twice, but she like can't get enough of it. So she was okay. My brother read it, and he liked it. I'm trying to think of who else. My cousin read it, and he called me up, and he's like, "Did these things really happen to you?" And so we had to go through the same way. I made my husband read it to me, and that helped. That was one of my first big edits, was making him read it to me out loud. Again, so different when you hear it out loud, and I would recommend everybody do that. And then my girls read it once it was already published, and my younger daughter said the most interesting thing. She read it, and she said, "I never occurred to me that that you were a person before you had kids before. And it was just such a interesting comment. She's like, I didn't know that you were like a human before you had us. Weren't you just always mom? But they both liked it. My older daughter was reading it and she'd like text me. She read it, I think, in like 2 nights or 3 nights. And she'd text me like at like 12:30 or 1. She's like, I'm on chapter 18, or I'm on chapter 40 or whatever, And so I think everybody was pretty happy with it. I think everybody was okay with it. I haven't had anybody get mad at me or say anything really derogatory about it or, have a big problem with it. So I'm thankful because it, gets in there. It gets into the nooks and crannies,
Well, that's good to hear.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm thankful for that.
So with all of the journey and the experience you have, if there's a writer out there who's scared of taking this leap into authorhood, what advice would you give them?
Just write and find a critique group, because the critique group, if you find one, will become your friend and part of your family. And just write, get it out there. I mean, what's the worst can happen is that somebody says, maybe you're not a great writer, but if you feel like you need to get it out, then you need to, and it's okay. And even if it's not good at the beginning, or you don't think it's good at the beginning, writing is a skill and you can learn how to do it. And, for me, the thing is, if you enjoy writing, just like any other hobby, if that's what it is for you, then you should do it. It's like singing off key, even if you suck, you should do it. I mean, nobody's going to be, on the Grammys or whatever, but if you like to sing, then sing. If you want to write. It doesn't matter if it sucks. It's okay. It's fine. It's just because there's a lot of people who can't, my husband writes beautifully, but, one sentence at a time, and he doesn't have the patience. So if you love to write and you have the patience and it's something that you want to do, just do it. Just do it, and then find a critique group. If you want to turn it into a book or you want it to go somewhere, absolutely find a critique group. They're all over the place.
Thank you for that. All right. So my last question for you is, if you could have lunch and conversation with an author, dead or alive, who would it be and why?
Oh man, you should have prepared me for that. I'm trying to think of like what one of my James Herriot. So when I was a little kid, those were some of the first books that I remember reading. When I remember being conscious, which is, I don't remember being conscious till I was like 13 or something, but All Creatures Great and Small, I read every single one of them. I used to watch it on PBS, and I dreamt of being a vet, which of course I'm not, and of going to live somewhere in the countryside in England, which of course I've never been to. And I just really liked him, and if I could just like go hang out with him for a day and go on his rounds, to see the horses and to whatever, that's what I would do. I love those books so much.
That is all the time we have for you today on The Ready Writer. I want to thank you, audience, for taking the time to watch, and of course our guests. Thank you, Gaby Anderson, for stopping on by and sharing your writing and publishing journey. That's it for now. We'll see you again.